Midnight, to one of the most disturbing cases recorded in the history of Harpers Ferry, West Virginia. Welcome to this journey. Before we begin, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact time you're listening to this narration. We're interested in knowing to which places and at what times of day or night these documented accounts reach. 022, the year was 1909. A small town nestled at the confluence of the Potomac and Shenandoah rivers, Harpers Ferry had already witnessed its share of American history. John Brown's infamous raid, the strategic importance during the Civil War, and the railroad expansion had all left their mark on this picturesque town. 045, but perched above it all, overlooking the rivers and the town below, stood the Hilltop Hotel. Construction had been completed just 2 years prior in 1907 by Thomas Lovett, a local entrepreneur who envisioned a grand establishment catering to wealthy travelers and Washington elites seeking respite from the capital's sweltering summers. 109, the Hilltop Hotel quickly gained popularity. Its impressive Victorian architecture, sweeping porches, and panoramic views made it the crown jewel of Harpers Ferry. The guest registry from those early years reads like a who's who of East Coast society. Politicians, industrialists, and their families would arrive by train. Their steamer trunks were carried up the steep path to the hotel by local porters. 135, room rates started at $2 per night, a considerable sum in 1909 that ensured a certain caliber of clientele. But on October 17, 1909, something happened at the Hilltop Hotel that would cast a long, dark shadow over the establishment. The Jefferson County Register reported that a guest, Mrs. Eleanor Blackwood, age 42, from Baltimore, had apparently vanished from her third-floor room overnight. 203, her belongings remained untouched. Her bed appeared slept in. The door was locked from the inside with the key still in the lock. The windows were shut. When hotel staff finally entered using a master key after Mrs. Blackwood failed to respond to knocks for over 24 hours, they found the room completely empty. The initial police report filed by Sheriff Danvers documented interviews with staff and guests. 230, no one reported hearing any disturbance. No one saw Mrs. Blackwood leave. She had simply vanished. Most puzzling was the note found on the writing desk. Asterisk, the walls are too thin here. I can hear them all breathing. They know I'm listening. Asterisk, the handwriting was verified as Mrs. Blackwood's by her husband, who arrived the following day. 252, what makes this case particularly unsettling is not just the inexplicable disappearance, but what followed. In the weeks after Mrs. Blackwood vanished, 3 more guests reported strange occurrences in their rooms, items moved, personal belongings rearranged, and most disturbing, the sensation of being watched while they slept. 313, these complaints were documented in the hotel manager's log, which was discovered decades later during renovations in 1964. Thomas Lovett, the hotel's owner, dismissed these concerns publicly. In a statement to the Harpers Ferry Gazette on November 2, 1909, he attributed the disappearance to Mrs. Blackwood likely having taken a pre-dawn walk and perhaps suffering a tragic accident on the steep paths surrounding the hotel. 342, as for the other complaints, he blamed the natural settling of a new building and the overactive imaginations of city folk unaccustomed to the sounds of country life. The Blackwood case was never solved. No body was ever found. The local authorities, limited in resources and expertise, eventually filed it away as an unsolved mystery. Mrs. 407, Blackwood's husband returned to Baltimore and life at the Hilltop Hotel continued. At least that's what the official record indicates. But the Hilltop's troubles were just beginning. What follows is an account compiled from hotel records, newspaper articles, personal correspondence, and interviews conducted between 1910 and 1968, when the last comprehensive investigation into the hotel's history was abandoned under mysterious circumstances. For 37, in 1909, the Hilltop Hotel was the epitome of Edwardian luxury in the American countryside. Electricity had been installed, a rarity for the region, though most rooms still featured gas lamps as a backup. Thick carpets from Philadelphia lined the hallways, muffling footsteps. The dining room, with its crystal chandeliers and panoramic windows, served 3 formal meals daily. Guests dressed for dinner. 504, chamber music was performed on Saturday evenings. Staff wore crisp uniforms and were trained to be practically invisible. Present when needed, but otherwise maintaining a respectful distance. The typical guests were families like the Pendletons from Richmond who stayed for 3 weeks every summer, or the Whitakers from Philadelphia, who came annually for the fall colors. 528, there were the regular business travelers like Mr. Hoffman, a textile buyer who always requested room 212, and politicians escaping Washington scrutiny. The hotel register from summer 1909 lists no fewer than 3 senators and a Supreme Court justice among its guests. Room service was available at all hours. 550, the night porter, James Miller, maintained a small kitchen on the ground floor where he could prepare simple meals and hot drinks for guests returning late from the town's limited nightlife or arriving on the midnight train from Washington. Yet, beneath this veneer of respectability and luxury, something at the Hilltop Hotel never felt quite right. 614, former staff members interviewed decades later spoke of cold spots in certain hallways, particularly the West Wing's 3rd floor. Housekeepers requested to work in pairs when cleaning rooms 307 through 312. The hotel's ledgers show an unusually high turnover of night staff compared to other establishments of similar size and status. 637, Margaret Wilson, who worked as a housekeeper from 1908 to 1911, told the Jefferson Historical Society in a 1953 interview, "There was nothing you could point to exactly, just a feeling that someone was standing behind you when you were alone in a room. The way items would be slightly moved when you turned your back." 657, we didn't talk about it much among ourselves. Mr. Lovett didn't like gossip, and jobs weren't easy to come by. Thomas Lovett himself maintained separate living quarters in town rather than residing at the hotel as was common for proprietors in that era. When questioned about this by the Harpers Ferry Business Association in 1910, he cited a desire to maintain professional distance from the operation. 724, but personal correspondence between Lovett and his brother, found in 1967 in the attic of Lovett's former home, suggests another reason. I cannot bring myself to spend another night under that roof. The sounds after midnight are not those of guests or settling wood. What's particularly striking in these early accounts is the absence of alarm. 746, the strange occurrences were noted, documented even, but accepted as mere curiosities rather than warnings. The Hilltop Hotel continued operating at near capacity. Its reputation grew. And then came the spring of 1910. On the evening of April 23, 1910, a violent thunderstorm swept through Harpers Ferry. 811, power lines were downed, roads flooded. The Hilltop Hotel, being the highest structure in the area, was struck by lightning not once but 3 times. According to the weather station records, the building itself sustained only minor damage, a testament to its solid construction, but the hotel's electrical system was completely destroyed. 833, for 3 days, the hotel operated by candlelight and oil lamps. Most guests chose to cut their stays short and return to Washington or Baltimore, but 12 guests remained, either unable or unwilling to travel in the inclement weather that continued throughout the week. Among these remaining guests was Dr. William Selfield, a psychiatrist from Johns Hopkins University, who was staying at the Hilltop while researching Civil War trauma cases in the region. Dr. 902, Selfield kept a detailed journal which his daughter donated to the Johns Hopkins Archives in 1946. His entries from April 24 to 27, 1910 describe what happened during those dark nights at the Hilltop Hotel. April 24, the storm continues unabated. Candlelight creates the most unsettling shadows in these high-ceilinged rooms. 926, Mrs. Lovett, the owner's wife, has taken charge in his absence. She seems unusually tense, constantly checking that doors remain locked after sunset. When I inquired as to the reason, she merely stated that the wind sometimes blows them open. There is something in her manner that suggests she is not being entirely forthcoming. 949, April 25, awoke at 3:17 a.m. to what sounded like scratching within the walls. Not the scurrying of rodents, which would be understandable in a building of this age, but methodical, almost deliberate. 3 scratches, pause, 3 scratches, pause. This continued for approximately 20 minutes before ceasing. 10:11, at breakfast, I mentioned this to fellow guest Mrs. Carrington. She turned quite pale and excused herself from the table without finishing her meal. April 26. The hotel feels increasingly confined as the storm prevents even brief walks outside. At dinner, only 8 of the 12 remaining guests appeared. Mrs. Lovett explained that the others were feeling unwell and had meals sent to their rooms. 10:39, young Thomas, the bellboy, appears particularly affected by the atmosphere. I observed him refusing to deliver a tray to the 3rd floor, instead convincing a maid to go in his place. When questioned, he whispered, "They're listening behind the walls up there." Asterisk the most disturbing entry comes from April 27, the day the storm finally broke and power was restored to Harpers Ferry. 11:04, asterisk upon finally leaving my room this morning, I discovered the most peculiar thing. A line of small objects had been placed outside my door during the night, a thimble, a pocket watch stopped at 3:17, a child's marble, a room key, not to my room, and a woman's hairpin. The items were arranged in a perfectly straight line, precisely equidistant from one another, asterisk. 11:27, asterisk none of the staff admit to placing them there. Mrs. Carrington is nowhere to be found this morning. Her room is empty, bed unslept in. Mrs. Lovett insists she must have left early, but her luggage remains, asterisk Mrs. Carrington, identified in hotel records as Beatrice Carrington, age 39, from Philadelphia, became the second documented disappearance from the Hilltop Hotel. Like Mrs. 1154, Blackwood before her, she vanished without taking her belongings. Unlike Mrs. Blackwood, there was no note, no explanation, and no mention in any local newspaper. The only official record of her stay is the hotel register and a single line in Sheriff Danvers' duty log, asterisk inquiry at Hilltop Hotel re, missing guest. Matter resolved as guest departed early, asterisk but Mrs. 1220, Carrington never returned to Philadelphia. Her husband filed a missing persons report on May 3, 1910. The investigation never connected her disappearance to the Hilltop Hotel. Instead, authorities in Philadelphia focused on her husband as the primary suspect, though no charges were ever filed due to lack of evidence. What happened during those dark nights in April 1910 marked a turning point for the Hilltop Hotel. 12:49, within weeks, staff began to resign. Guests reported being assigned to different rooms upon arrival than those they had reserved. Guests were being moved away from the third-floor west wing. Thomas Lovett hired a new hotel manager, Augustus Hargrove, who implemented strict new policies, no guests to be left alone in the hotel at any time. 1312, minimum staffing of 3 employees overnight. All third-floor west wing rooms to be used for storage rather than guests. These measures were presented publicly as service improvements. Privately, in a letter to his brother dated June 17, 1910, Lovett wrote, "The changes have stemmed the tide for now, no further incidents since we sealed off that section." 1336, asterisk Hargrove suggests we renovate completely, tear down walls to bare studs. The expense would be ruinous, but I fear the alternative may be worse. Asterisk that renovation never took place. Instead, the hotel continued operating with certain rooms permanently unavailable to guests. For a while, this compromise seemed to work. 1358, the years passed. The Hilltop Hotel maintained its reputation as the finest accommodation in Harpers Ferry. World War I came and went. Prohibition transformed the hotel's celebrated bar into a tea room that nevertheless continued serving alcohol in coffee cups to trusted guests. Through it all, the third-floor west wing remained closed. 1422, its rooms were used to store furniture, linens, and the accumulated detritus of hotel operations. Staff continued to avoid the area when possible. Housekeepers refused to enter alone. Maintenance was performed only during daylight hours and always by pairs of workers. These precautions became simply the way things were done at the Hilltop, passed down from experienced staff to new hires without detailed explanation. 1450, from 1910 to 1926, no unusual disappearances were recorded at the hotel. The sealed rooms seemed to contain whatever presence had disturbed the establishment. But the hotel's guest registers from this period, preserved in the Jefferson County Historical Archives, show a curious pattern. Guests who stayed in rooms directly below the sealed section often checked out earlier than planned. 1516, their reasons, when noted, were invariably vague: family emergency, business matter requiring attention, sudden illness. The hotel's financial records from this period show a gradual decline in profitability despite steady occupancy rates. Maintenance costs increased dramatically year over year, with particular emphasis on plumbing and electrical work in the central and western sections of the building. 1543, a notation in the 1922 expense ledger reads, * replaced ceiling room 212, water damage from above. Source unidentified as third floor rooms unoccupied and pipes shut off. Thomas Lovett's personal diaries from these years, discovered in 1964 during the estate sale following his granddaughter's death, reveal a man increasingly obsessed with the hotel, yet reluctant to visit it. 1611, entries mention weekly meetings with manager Hargrove, always taking place in Lovett's town office rather than at the hotel itself. His last recorded visit to the property was for a Christmas staff dinner in 1918, which was held in the detached carriage house rather than the main building. One particularly revealing entry from February 1924 reads, Hargrove reports the sounds have returned. 1640, guests in 214 and 215 complained of conversations overhead despite those rooms being vacant. I've authorized additional soundproofing. We cannot afford another incident. Not after Blackwood and Carrington. Certainly not after what happened to Miller. This reference to Miller, presumably James Miller, the night porter mentioned earlier, is the only indication in any record that something may have happened to him. 1703, employment records show he ceased working at the hotel in November 1911, but no reason is given. No death certificate exists in Jefferson County records. No further mention of him appears in any known document until this cryptic diary entry 13 years later. The precarious equilibrium at the Hilltop Hotel ended abruptly in the winter of 1926. 1728, on the night of January 17, a date that would later prove significant, a fire broke out in the hotel kitchen. The blaze was quickly contained and extinguished before it could spread beyond the ground floor. No guests were injured. Property damage was minimal and limited to the kitchen and adjacent storage areas. 1749, the event would have been a mere footnote in the hotel's history if not for what the fire revealed. When Fire Chief Walter Simmons conducted his inspection the following morning, he insisted on checking the entire building for any hidden hot spots that might reignite. This inspection included the sealed third-floor west wing, which had not been properly examined in years. 1810, what Simmons discovered in room 309 was documented in his official report, though that report was quickly classified and removed from public records. A copy was discovered in 1967 in a sealed envelope in the personal effects of Sheriff Raymond Lewis, who had succeeded Danvers in 1922. Simmons's report describes entering room 309 to find it not in use for storage as expected, but furnished as if for a guest, bed made with fresh linens, towels in the bathroom, even a carafe of water on the nightstand. Most disturbing was 1847, the guest book on the writing desk, open to a page filled with names and dates. The names included Eleanor Blackwood and Beatrice Carrington alongside dozens of others, some matching known missing persons cases from across the eastern seaboard. Beside each name was a room number and date, all within the Hilltop Hotel, all from the previous 16 years. 1913, the final entry in this macabre guest book was dated January 17, 1926, the very night of the fire, with the name Augustus Hargrove, the hotel's manager. His body was discovered hours later in the basement coal room, an apparent suicide. The official cause of death was recorded as asphyxiation, though certain details in the coroner's report suggest he may have been dead before the fire started. 1942, the discovery in room 309 prompted a more thorough search of the sealed wing. Behind a false wall in room 311, investigators found a collection of personal items belonging to missing guests, jewelry, watches, wallets, combs, even a child's toy soldier. Each item was meticulously labeled with a name and date corresponding to entries in the guest book. 2006, most chilling was the collection of hotel uniform buttons, name tags, and personal effects belonging to staff members who had supposedly resigned over the years, including James Miller's pocket watch, still at 317. The investigation that followed was brief and oddly superficial. Within 2 days, Sheriff Lewis declared the case closed, attributing all irregularities to the disturbed mind of Augustus Hargrove, who was posthumously blamed for a series of murders dating back to 1909. 2039, this hastily drawn conclusion ignored several obvious facts. Hargrove had not even been employed at the hotel when Mrs. Blackwood disappeared. The sealed rooms predated his management. And most significantly, some of the items recovered belonged to people who had vanished after being documented in other locations following their stay at the Hilltop. 2103, the Jefferson County Register published a short article on January 22, 1926 with the headline, Hotel Manager Suicide Reveals Disturbed Mind. The article made no mention of the guest book or the items found behind the wall. 3 days later, the newspaper printed a retraction even of this limited information, citing factual inaccuracies without specifying what they were. 2129, Thomas Lovett sold the Hilltop Hotel in February 1926 to Eastern Hospitality Group, a company based in New York with no previous ties to Harpers Ferry. Lovett left town shortly thereafter, reportedly moving to Florida. No forwarding address was ever recorded. The hotel closed for renovations on March 1, 1926, with all staff dismissed with 2 weeks severance pay and strict confidentiality agreements, copies of which were found in 1968 in the Jefferson County Courthouse archives. 2205, when the Hilltop reopened in June 1926, it had been completely remodeled. The third floor had been reconfigured, with the west wing eliminated entirely and converted into an expanded attic space. Room numbering throughout the hotel was changed. New staff was brought in, none of whom had previously worked at the establishment. 2229, the hotel's past was quite literally papered over. For the next 3 decades, the Hilltop Hotel operated without reported incident. Its history from 1909 to 1926 faded from public memory, preserved only in scattered records and the fading recollections of Harpers Ferry's older residents. The hotel changed hands several times, eventually becoming part of a regional chain in the 1940s. 2255, tourism to Harpers Ferry declined during the Depression and World War II, but rebounded in the post-war years as Americans took to the roads for vacation travel. In 1957, a young historian named Martin Crenshaw arrived in Harpers Ferry to research a book on the area's Civil War history. While examining property records at the county courthouse, he stumbled upon references to Sheriff Lewis's sealed files regarding the Hilltop Hotel. 2325, intrigued by this footnote, Crenshaw began asking questions around town. Most longtime residents refused to discuss the matter. Those who did speak offered only vague warnings or quickly changed the subject. Undeterred, Crenshaw checked into the Hilltop Hotel in October 1957, requesting a room on the second floor, directly below where the sealed west wing had once been. 2352, according to hotel records, he stayed for 3 nights before checking out suddenly, leaving behind several books and a notebook in his room. The notebook, preserved by a curious housekeeper who later provided it to investigators, contains increasingly agitated entries. October 12, 1957. The ceiling above my bed has a water stain that seems to grow larger each time I look at it. 2400 hours 19. The hotel manager assures me there is no leak. When I asked about the 3rd floor above my room, he insisted it's just attic space. But I hear footsteps overhead at night, regular, measured, pacing back and forth. October 13, 1957, spent the day at the courthouse. Found death certificates for 3 hotel employees from 1911, 1925, all listed as suicides or accidents. 2400 hours 46, all 3 had worked night shifts. Met an elderly man at the local diner who claimed to be the nephew of James Miller. He refused to speak about his uncle's employment at the hotel, saying, "Some things are best left alone, young man. Some doors should stay closed." October 14, 1957. 3:17 a.m. 25:08, woke to scratching sounds in the walls. 3 scratches, 3 scratches. Turned on all lights. The sound stopped immediately. When I pressed my ear to the wall, I could hear what sounded like whispering, too faint to make out words. I must be imagining things due to all these old stories. The final entry dated October 15, 1957 reads simply, "They're in the walls." 25:31, they know I'm listening. I have to get out now. Crenshaw checked out that morning and returned to his home in Baltimore. He abandoned his research on Harpers Ferry and reportedly suffered a nervous breakdown several months later. In a 1962 interview with a paranormal investigation journal, the only time he spoke publicly about his experience, Crenshaw stated, "I don't believe in ghosts." 25:58, I don't know what was in that hotel, but it wasn't something that had died. It was something that had never been alive in the way we understand life. Martin Crenshaw's experience might have remained an isolated incident if not for what happened in the summer of 1964. The Hilltop Hotel, now owned by Mountain View Resorts Incorporated, 26:19, was undergoing its first major renovation since 1926. During the removal of attic walls to install updated air conditioning, workers discovered a space that didn't appear on any building plans. A sealed room accessible only through a small crawl space behind what had once been room 309. The construction foreman David Wheeler documented the discovery in his daily log. 26:47, unusual space discovered during demolition. Approximately 10 feet by 10 feet appears to have been deliberately walled off during previous renovation. Contains a single chair facing the corner. Walls covered with writing. Same phrase repeated hundreds of times, they check in but they don't check out. Writing appears to be in different handwritings and different materials. 27:08, pencil, ink, what looks like blood in some places. Informed management, told to seal it back up immediately. Bonus offered for crew's discretion. Wheeler took photographs before resealing the room. These photos along with his log were submitted to the Jefferson County Historical Society in 1968 as part of his personal papers following his death from a heart attack. 27:36, the Society's archivist at the time, Eliza Montgomery, recognized the significance of the discovery and attempted to launch a more thorough investigation of the hotel's history. Montgomery spent months compiling records, hotel registers, employment records, police reports, newspaper articles, personal accounts, creating the most comprehensive picture of the Hilltop's troubled past. 28:01, she tracked down former employees, including Anna Pearson, a housekeeper from 1922 to 1926, who provided the most disturbing testimony yet. "We all knew about room 309, Pearson stated in a recorded interview from May 1968. "We called it the listening room." 28:23, Mr. Hargrove would spend hours in there alone. Said he was taking inventory, but there was nothing to count in there. Just that chair and his book. Sometimes we'd hear him talking like he was having a conversation, but he was always alone when someone checked. After a while, we just learned not to go near that wing unless we absolutely had to, and never after dark. 28:45, when asked about the items found behind the wall in 1926, Pearson became agitated. Those weren't the only things in the walls. There were spaces, hollowed-out spaces where something could stand or crouch in the walls between rooms. That's where the sounds came from. The scratching, the whispering. They weren't in the rooms. They were between them, watching, listening through little holes drilled in the wallpaper. 29:13, you'd only notice if you knew where to look. Montgomery's investigation came to an abrupt end in November 1968. According to Jefferson County Sheriff Department records, she arrived at the Hilltop Hotel on November 17 with a photographer and permission from the current manager to examine the attic space identified in Wheeler's log. 29:37, the hotel was closed for the season with only minimal maintenance staff present. Neither Montgomery nor the photographer, Robert Hayes, ever emerged from the hotel. When staff went to check on them after several hours of silence, they found the attic access open, but no sign of either person. Their car remained in the parking lot. Their camera equipment was found neatly arranged at the foot of the attic stairs, untouched and unused. 30:03, the search for Montgomery and Hayes lasted 3 days and involved local police, fire departments, and volunteer search parties. No trace of either person was ever found. The official report concludes, no evidence of foul play. No sign of struggle or forced entry/exit. Individuals likely left premises by unknown means for unknown reasons. 30:27, following this incident, the Jefferson County Historical Society sealed all records relating to the Hilltop Hotel. The documentation remained inaccessible until 1996 when a Freedom of Information request from an anonymous researcher finally brought them to light. By then, the hotel had been closed permanently, a victim of changing travel patterns and declining interest in the once popular resort area. 30:55, the building itself still stands, though it has been abandoned since 1976. Periodic efforts to restore or repurpose the structure have all failed, with developers citing prohibitive costs and structural issues as reasons for abandoning their projects. Local rumors suggest other reasons: construction crews refusing to work after dark, unexplained accidents, tools and materials disappearing. 31-22, a final curious epilogue to this story emerged in 2007 when a former night auditor for the hotel during its final years of operation published an anonymous account online. This individual claimed that the hotel maintained a separate registration system for certain rooms, a paper ledger kept in the manager's office rather than the modern computerized system used for most guests. 31:47 Every month, like clockwork, we would get reservations for specific rooms, the account states. Asterisk, always the same pattern, one night only, always paid in cash, always checked in after midnight. The names were different each time, but the rooms were always the same ones, directly below where the old West Wing had been, asterisk. 32:07 asterisk we were instructed never to disturb these guests, never to provide housekeeping during their stay, and never to check the rooms until at least noon the day after their scheduled checkout. The strangest part was that I never actually saw these guests arrive. The reservations would be in the book, the keys would be taken from their hooks, and in the morning, the keys would be returned to the front desk, asterisk. 32:32 asterisk but the rooms, when checked later, always showed signs of occupancy, beds unmade, towels used, water glasses empty. And there was always the same thing written on the hotel notepad: "Thank you for your hospitality. See you next month." 317 asterisk whether this final account is authentic or merely another embellishment in the Hilltop Hotel's legend remains uncertain. 32:56 What is documented, however, is that on the 17th day of each month from the hotel's closing in 1976 until at least 1988, someone placed a bouquet of dried flowers at the property's gate. Each bouquet contained the same composition: white lilies, black roses, and a sprig of rosemary for remembrance. The Hilltop Hotel still stands today, its windows boarded, its grandeur faded. 33:23 From a distance, it maintains the dignified appearance of an aging dowager, revealing nothing of its secrets. But locals still avoid the property after sunset. Hikers on nearby trails report the sound of scratching coming from the building, even on windless days. And longtime residents of Harpers Ferry share a common warning with visitors interested in the old hotel. 33:49 They checked in, they never checked out, and they're still listening. Some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed again. Some histories, once forgotten, find ways to be remembered. And in the walls of the Hilltop Hotel, something still waits. Patient, attentive, and always listening. 34:10 In 1965, a doctoral student named Catherine Wheeler from Georgetown University discovered a series of letters in the university archives exchanged between Thomas Lovett and Dr. William Selfield following the latter's stay at the Hilltop in 1910. These letters, never catalogued properly and thus overlooked for decades, shed additional light on the hotel's mysteries. 34:36 In a letter dated May 30, 1910, Selfield wrote, "My dear Mr. Lovett, I must inquire whether you have given further thought to my observations regarding the acoustical anomalies in your establishment. As I mentioned during our conversation before my departure, the architectural configuration of the West Wing creates what might be termed whispering corridors, spaces where sound travels in unusual and potentially disturbing ways, 35:05 This phenomenon, while scientifically explicable, could account for many of the unsettling experiences reported by your guests." Lovett's response, dated June 7, 1910, reveals a man grasping for rational explanations. Your theory regarding the acoustic properties of the hotel's construction has provided much-needed peace of mind. 35:28 I have consulted with an architect about modifications that might address these issues without requiring extensive reconstruction. In the meantime, we have implemented your suggestion about reclassifying certain rooms. I cannot thank you enough for providing a scientific explanation for what some of my more superstitious staff had attributed to less natural causes. 35:50 But Selfield's final letter in the sequence, dated August 12, 1910, suggests his scientific explanation was offered more as comfort than conviction. I am pleased my acoustic theory has provided some reassurance. However, I feel compelled to add a word of caution. While architectural anomalies may explain some of what occurs in your hotel, they cannot account for all that I experienced during those dark nights in April. 36:20 There are sounds that have no source, Mr. Lovett. There are whispers that form no words any human tongue has spoken, and there are things that listen from places where nothing should be able to hide. I will not be returning to the Hilltop Hotel. For your own well-being, I suggest you consider divesting yourself of the property entirely. Wheeler's discovery might have led to renewed academic interest in the Hilltop case, but her research notes end abruptly in November 1965. 36:51, a notation from her faculty advisor indicates she withdrew from the university for health reasons and did not return to complete her dissertation. The final documented investigation into the Hilltop Hotel's history occurred in 1968, led by Professor James Latimer of Columbia University's Department of Paranormal Psychology. 37:14, unlike his predecessors, Latimer approached the hotel's mysteries from a psychological rather than historical or supernatural perspective. His hypothesis, outlined in grant applications and research notes, was that the Hilltop represented a case of location-specific mass hysteria, a site where suggestion and expectation created a cycle of perceived supernatural experiences. 37:41, Latimer and 2 graduate assistants spent 5 nights in the hotel in August 1968, using early electronic equipment to record ambient sounds, measure temperature fluctuations, and document their own psychological responses to the environment. Their preliminary findings submitted to the university in September 1968 indicated multiple anomalies that defied conventional explanation. 38:08, audio recordings from room 212 captured whispered conversations that none of the research team heard during the recording session. Spectral analysis indicates at least 3 distinct voices speaking in what appears to be early 20th century American English dialects. Most phrases are unintelligible, but recurring statements include, "They're writing it down." 38:35, "He can hear us now," and *317 is coming. Temperature mapping revealed consistent cold spots in specific locations, all corresponding to spaces where walls between guest rooms would have contained plumbing or electrical chases. These temperature variations cannot be explained by ventilation patterns or structural features of the current building configuration. 38:57, most concerning are the consistent psychological effects reported by all team members, sensations of being observed, particularly while sleeping, vivid dreams featuring hotel corridors and rooms not present in the current building layout, and an increasing reluctance to enter certain areas of the hotel as the investigation progressed. 39:19, Latimer planned to return in December 1968 with additional equipment and personnel. This return visit never occurred. Instead, the university archives contain a brief memo dated November 20, 1968, Hilltop Hotel research project terminated due to disappearance of local collaborator E. Montgomery and assistant R. 39:43, *Haze during preliminary site investigation. All materials collected to be sealed pending review. The sealed records from Latimer's truncated investigation remained inaccessible until 2001 when they were included in a mass digitization of university archives. By then, Latimer himself had long since abandoned paranormal research, becoming instead a respected cognitive psychologist specializing in trauma and memory. 40:15, when contacted by paranormal researchers about his early work at the Hilltop, his standard response was a form letter stating he no longer discussed that period of his career and suggesting that youthful academic enthusiasm often leads down questionable research paths best left unexplored. What makes the Hilltop Hotel case so enduring is not just the documented disappearances or strange occurrences, but the pattern of investigation itself. 40:45, each researcher who delved into the mystery either abandoned their work abruptly or disappeared while conducting it. This pattern created a self-perpetuating silence, as each interrupted investigation left questions unanswered and warnings unheeded. The hotel's current state of abandonment serves as a physical manifestation of this unresolved history. 41:11, ownership of the property has changed hands multiple times since the 1970s, but no development plans have progressed beyond initial permits. The most recent attempt in 2008 ended when the development company declared bankruptcy after spending millions on plans and preliminary site work without ever breaking ground on actual construction. 41:32, local records indicate that engineering surveys have consistently identified structural issues requiring extensive remediation before renovation can proceed. Yet independent assessments have found the building's basic structure remarkably sound for its age. The stone foundation and main support beams show little deterioration despite decades of neglect. 41:57, what keeps the Hilltop Hotel standing empty on its promontory above Harpers Ferry seems to be not physical decay, but something more intangible, a reluctance to disturb whatever remains within its walls. As one local contractor put it in a 2010 interview with the Jefferson County Historical Society, some buildings want to be restored. This one doesn't, 42:20, you can feel it when you're inside. It wants to be left alone with whatever it's keeping in there. Perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the Hilltop case is how effectively it has been erased from official history. Despite multiple disappearances, documented investigations, and decades of unexplained phenomena, the hotel rarely appears in books about America's haunted locations or paranormal hotspots. 42 to 48, local tourism materials mention it only as a historic hotel currently awaiting restoration. Online searches yield primarily architectural information and occasional references to its early prominence as a luxury establishment. This silence extends beyond public records to private conversations. Residents of Harpers Ferry, when asked about the hotel by visitors, tend to provide only minimal information about its current abandoned state. 43:18, some claim this reticence stems from concern about property values or tourism impact. Others suggest a more visceral reason. Speaking too much about the hilltop seems to attract its attention. My grandmother worked there as a girl, one elderly resident told a local historian in 2012. She would never talk about it except to say one thing. 43:40, what listens never stops listening. That's all she would say. Changed the subject if you asked more. Took whatever she knew to her grave. In a filing cabinet in the Jefferson County Sheriff's Department, there is a folder labeled simply *.